This year, you turned 45 years old. In these 45 years, you have seen some of the most beautiful things that only God knew could exist. You saw that for the first time in 1997, then again in 2000, 2007, 2014, and then in 2016. You experienced a love that only a mother can truly understand. In these 45 years, you have fallen in and out of love more times than seems humanly possible. In these 45 years, you have had your heart broken more times than you even knew you could survive. In these 45 years, you formed bonds with people that you thought were going to be going along on this ride called life, right along with you. And in these 45 years, you had to say goodbye to people who you took in and claimed as your people. In these 45 years, you learned what it felt like to be betrayed. In these 45 years, you learned what it felt like to be invisible. In these 45 years, you learned what it felt like to be forgotten. And in these 45 years, you learned what it felt like to have the words of your heart be muted.
Yeah, I've been down so long, it looks like up to me.
In these 45 years, you learned what it felt like to be introduced to perfect strangers that you've known your entire life. In these 45 years, you've learned what true loss feels like. In these 45 years, you saw a mother whose love for her children knows no bounds stand above her dead child and have to say goodbye to her. In these 45 years, you had a forced relationship with God, to then have a new relationship with God, to then become so mad at God, to then fall in love with God all over again. And then to finally have a true relationship with God. In these 45 years, you learned what it feels like to allow God to use you, even when you didn't want the assignment. In these 45 years, you learned what it feels like to trust God when you were the most scared, even though you couldn't see him, and at times you couldn't even feel him. In these 45 years, you faced death twice. You faced death while you were carrying life, and you faced death on earth while you were in hell on earth. In these 45 years, you had to learn to know love, even when the one person who should have loved you the hardest loved you the least. In these 45 years, life has not been very kind to you. In these 45 years, you had to keep being reminded that God gives his toughest battles to his strongest soldiers. In these 45 years, you had to learn to keep fighting even when you wanted to wave the white flag. You had to keep fighting even when you prayed that God would see your white flag and take you out of the battle. You had to keep fighting even when you tried to wave your own white flag and end the battle for yourself. In these 45 years, you had to learn to still love even when you were filled with hate. In these 45 years, you had to learn what it felt like to trust God even when you felt like he had forgotten about you, just like everyone else you loved had. In these 45 years, you had to be strong for others when you didn't have it in you to even be strong for yourself. In these 45 years, you had to reprogram your mind to go from thinking you do not deserve to receive the level of love you had constantly and consistently poured onto and into others. In these 45 years, you had to be repurposed and repositioned more times than you can count. It has taken 45 years for you to see you, to see the you that God sees. It has taken 45 years for you to see how important you are. It has taken 45 years for you to see the mission God placed you on. It has taken 45 years for you to gain the fearlessness to face anything and anyone that you needed to take down. For most, 45 years represents the midway point in the human lifetime. But for me, 45 years represents the beginning of my life. It took 45 years for me to see me. It took 45 years for me to know me. It took 45 years for me to stand up for me. It took 45 years for me to be brave enough to stand in the me that I truly am. It took 45 long years for me to get here. But the beauty of life is, as long as there is breath left in your lungs, then you have another day to try again. Today, I celebrate you, Fronten'a. You are worthy. You are deserving. You are seen. You are heard. You are loved. You are love. God created you for his divine purpose, and today is another day to try again and get it right. SZA inspired me to literally write this today because one of her songs, it just really inspired me. In this particular song, she called it Snooze. She says, I can't lose when I'm with you. How can I snooze and miss this moment? You're just too important. Fronten'a, you can't lose. Not when you're with you. Because God chose you. Don't you dare snooze and miss this moment. You're just way too important. What do we say? Chosen to year 45.
Year 45. You're a beast.
What?
You're a beast.
Your mom.
I can't lose when I'm with you. How can I snooze and miss the moment? You're just too important.
Since you're already here, you might as well watch another video. I'll just put it right here for you. It's right here. Just one little click. Go ahead. So we can be together longer, okay? All right, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.